is Old Testament very, very important because of its sheer volume. The Old Testament is 2/3 of the Bible. For those of you who like mathematics, you must be aware that the Old Testament is 67% of the contents of the Bible. So when the Old Testament is 67%, it means that the Old Testament is very, very important. You can't avoid it. Number two, the Old Testament is very important because it contains the gem. It contains the basis of all the great Christian doctrines. Some of the basic Christian doctrines are the doctrine of God. Genesis chapter 1 verses 1. The Bible says, Bereshit bara Elohim Adonai. In the beginning, God. One of the greatest Christian doctrines of the Bible is the doctrine of God. And it is found in the Old Testament. Because it begins with God. The doctrine of creation. Very critical. That God created the world ex nihilo. I'll teach you as I teach you systematic theology. That God created the world out of nothing. And it's an important and critical doctrine. We also look and discuss if the 6 days of creation were literal. Were they the literal 6 days or were they long periods of time? Do we have a window that we can believe in creation and evolution? Do we have a window? Indeed we have. And we find that religion and science are not in competition, but they are incompatible. They deal with different issues. Science deals with the natural issues, empirical things, things that can be measured with our 5 common senses. But religion and Christianity deals with things that are beyond the common senses. Things to do with beliefs, things to do with faith, and the internal motivation of a man. Therefore, I want to tell you all the critical doctrines are found in the Old Testament. That is the gem, the origin. The doctrine of sin, Genesis chapter 3. You remember Adam, Eve, and the serpent, and the first sin. Murder. All the critical doctrines of the Bible are found in the Old Testament, including redemption. Genesis chapter 3 verses 15. The seed of the woman is Jesus Christ. And we find the doctrine of election and predestination. It is well captured in the Old Testament. The law, the covenants, the Abrahamic covenant. You see, the main covenants that we have are all encapsulated, most of them in the Old Testament, and the New Covenant finds its clear exposition in the New Testament. There is the Adamic covenant, that's the first covenant. Number 2, there is the Noahic covenant. There is the Abrahamic covenant. Then from the Abrahamic covenant, there is the Mosaic covenant. Later, there is the Davidic covenant. And lastly, there is the New Covenant, where the law will be written in the hearts. And that New Covenant is celebrated in the New Testament during the Holy Communion service. Therefore, all critical doctrines are found in the Old Testament. You cannot afford to assume the Old Testament. Read the Old Testament. And for us as Anglicans, let me put it to you very clearly that most of our readings, are they found in the Old Testament or New Testament?
Old Testament.
When you go to the Psalms, how many readings more often than not are in the Psalms? How many readings are there?
In the Old Testament.
No, there are 3
readings, yeah.
There is the Psalm, There is the Old Testament lesson,
Yes.
and there is a
New Testament, yeah.
So how many readings are from the Old Testament?
Two.
One from the New Testament. And some scholars say, but the Old Testament is the New Testament enfolded. Things that are in the New Testament are enfolded in the Old Testament. They are there, but they become unfolded in the New Testament. Therefore, the Old Testament is very, very critical. Just as I told you, that most of the Old Testament is written in the Hebrew language. And the Hebrew language that the Old Testament was written was a language that words were written with consonants only. Do you know the meaning of the word consonants? From A, B, C, D. Do you know the consonants and the vowels? What are the vowels? R, A, E, O, U. Therefore, the Old Testament was written in Hebrew with consonants only, without vowels. The vowels were placed later. The most interesting part of the Hebrew language is the Hebrew language you begin writing from the right to the left. And if this is your book, assuming this is your book and you're writing in a Hebrew class, you begin from the last page to the first. You begin from here. This is the first page. You write like this. But with us, we go from the left to the right. But they go from the right to the left. And you'll find that there were many versions of the Hebrew Bible. But allow me to point, there is the Bereshit version. But allow me to point two distinct Bibles. There is the Hebrew canon and the Greek canon. The Hebrew canon contains the 39 books that we have. Those books are canonical. But the Greek canon contains additional books that are called apocrypha or deuterocanonical books. Deuterocanonical books are books of the second canon or books with hidden meaning. Some of these books include Judith, Esdras, Tobit, the Wisdom, First Maccabees, Second Maccabees, Third Maccabees, Fourth Maccabees. These books were not considered authoritative, but when the 72 scholars translated the LX Septuagint, they translated and included some of these apocrypha books or the second canons. We, the Protestants, do not have these books in our canon. But the Catholics have these books. They have deuterocanonical books. When you look at the Jerusalem Bible by the Catholics, they have those books. And those books contains the gist of some of the teachings. And you remember somebody by the name of Jerome. Jerome published, translated the Old Testament variants from Hebrew to Latin. And you will find the danger of some of these some of these deuterocanonical books. From it, like Maccabees, we get the doctrine of purgatory. You remember purgatory? When you look at systematic theology 2, we will discuss the intermediate state of death, where the soul goes from the time of death to the time of resurrection. There is heaven, there is hell. But Catholics have a third place that is called purgatory. Purgatory is for the people who have not done mortal sins, but they need purging and cleansing. Most of the teachings of purgatory is found in the book of Maccabees, where you pay penance for the dead. And you redeem their soul. You remember during Reformation. You read Church History 1. You remember during Reformation. Ras the Tezel, this man was selling indulgence during the time of Luther, says the moment a soul flies from heaven to purgatory, a soul, the moment the coin touches the box, a soul flies from purgatory to heaven. They wanted to build the greatest church, still the biggest church up to today, St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. From the Greek word basileia, kingdom. The Basilica, the biggest church in the world, was built with indulgence money. But they draw the authority from deuterocanonical discipline. And some of the teachings, you remember the seven sacraments of the Catholic. Among them is penance. Penance is drawn mostly from some of the mistranslation by Jerome of the Vulgate and from each text. But today, as we look at Old Testament survey, I'm just giving you, whetting your appetite for the real thing, the Old Testament survey. We look at the history behind the biblical text, so that you understand the biblical text much better. We look at what is behind the scene. We go back to the ancient Near East, the land of Mesopotamia, the land that is next to river, that is in between the river Euphrates and the river Tigris, the cradle of civilization. That is the land that we endeavor to look at in Old Testament survey. We look at the patriarchs. The patriarchs, there were three patriarchs. Who can tell me the three patriarchs? There is Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We look at the patriarch. And we define patriarchy. What is patriarchy? Patriarchy is leadership that is bestowed on men and is inherited by men. We look at patriarchy and the system of the family. We will discuss as we look together in the Old Testament. We will look at patriarchy. And the patriarchs, they are found in Genesis chapter 12 to chapter 50. So chapter 37 to 50 talks about Joseph, who is not considered really a patriarch, but it talks about patriarchy. We look at the food that they ate. We look at their soap that they got from fat from the animals. We look at the situation of the patriarchy. We look at patriarchy lived where they lived in the wilderness, and water was very important. My friend was saying, who comes from these families, we look at patriarchs. We look at the places where they live. They live in the wilderness. When you're in the wilderness, water and rain is very important. Why is it important for saying that you know the rain patterns? Because you must know which time of the year there will be water where and what particular time. Number two, you must know when the floods come. Have you ever been in a semi-arid area and rains and you get yourself in a seasonal river? You may be carried out. Rains are very unpredictable, and the wilderness can be very harsh if you do not know rains. Either floods or droughts are dangerous. So a patriarch knew how to navigate. Their family was supposed to be between 25 to 50 members. Why? If they were less than 25, they could have been attacked. But if they were more than 50, it could be difficult to feed them. So when they reach 50 and above, they split into different families. Women used to mend the tent, which was where they used to sleep. It's a dry area. They don't need a lot of cover. And they used to do cooking. And men had weapons. They prepared the tent. And men would entertain themselves with stories. And there were two sides of the tent, the sides of men and the side of women. So that's the story of the patriarch. That's when you will understand why Abraham had to move up to Egypt when there was a drought. And he came back. While they were moving looking for pastors. But the other thing that is very critical is that the patriarch's religion was that God was everything to them. God was everything to the patriarch. Why? He depended upon God for rain. He depended upon God for each and everything in life. Therefore, the patriarchs were very, 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 very religious people. From the time of the patriarchs, we will go and look at the time of the Exodus. And we look at the two theories of Exodus. Was it written during the time of the Hyksos king or during the time of Ramses? Was it Amenhotep who was the pharaoh, or was it Ramses? You will discover that there are two theories. The first theory is taken from Judges chapter 6 verses 1, that text supports the earlier Exodus period. Then the second position that is taken from the book of Exodus chapter 1 verses 12. The cities that Ramses built. The cities that he built. These cities support the Ramses theory. But I want to say the evidence is inconclusive. And you must know that it is in Exodus that there is the redemption and the formulation of the children of Israel. In Exodus, every plague was directed to a particular God. Just as I want to remind you, the first 5 books, don't forget, it came in a question. You remember the Mosaic authorship and documentary hypothesis. Do you remember that question? What are the evidence and proofs of Mosaic authorship? What was the evidence to support Mosaic authorship? Number 1, there is the internal evidence from the books. The books, especially Exodus, part of Numbers, and Deuteronomy, the books are very categorical that they were written by Moses. You must know also that Moses was a learned son of a king. He was literate. Therefore, he was able to write. Not like Muhammad. You know the story of Muhammad. Muhammad was forced and beaten by the angel Gabriel to write. Ikra, they told him, write. He was not literate, but Moses was literate. They believe in mechanical inspiration, that the angel beat Muhammad until he was able to write. But we believe that God used the personalities of the writers. He used their humanity and their experience, and thus they were able to write. That's why it is critical that you understand Mosaic authorship. Moses was literate. Number 3, some of the events, Moses was a witness. It was written with first-hand information. And the person who wrote the Pentateuch knew the desert like the back of his hands. And who else knew the desert better than Moses? Now, these among other reasons that I will explain. Now, there is a second position that is called documentary hypothesis. Documentary hypothesis was postulated by people like Spinoza. Spinoza is a Jew philosopher. In the 16th century, Spinoza doubted the Messiah authorship. Then people like Strauss picked it, but the doctrine reached its rich elucidation by a man by the name of Julius Wellhausen. Julius Wellhausen postulated a theory. Theory is ideas that have never been proven. He postulated a theory that somebody like Ezra, an editor, compiled Pentateuch around 400 BC. You remember we split Moses' life into three. 1527 to 1487, Moses was in the palace. Eating chapati and all the good things. Like some of you in a short while, you will be in the palace, the parish of your choice, where the stipend is coming, and you think you'll live there forever. No. When he was in the palace, that is the time he wrote Genesis. Then from 1487 to 1447, he was in the Median desert. In the in-laws, when you're in the house of the in-law, you don't have a say. This is the time that Bible scholars believe Moses compiled the book of Job from a court record. Why? Some of the evidence is that the Median desert was close to Uz, the land of Job. It was just across adjacent. Number two, during this particular time, the suffering of Job is like the suffering of the children of Israel. So Moses had the authority and the interest to comment this story. He wrote Genesis when he was in the palace, seeing the suffering of the children of Israel. And when he saw, he wrote this book to encourage them that God is faithful to his promises. Because God promised that after 400 years, he's going to deliver the children of Israel from Egypt. Then, from 1447 to 1407, where Moses dies at the plain of Moab, Mount Nebo, just as he sees the promised land, this is the time that he wrote Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. So this is the time that he wrote the 5 books. And remember, the organic unity of the book supports Mosaic authorship. It is a flow. The story flows. Genesis ends with the children of Israel in Egypt. Exodus begins with the children of Israel in Egypt. The story flows. And it is unbroken. The thematic unity supports Mosaic. Now, when they were in Egypt, they were liberated. Then Leviticus tells of the priestly code. Numbers tells the story of murmurings and wanderings. 40 years in the desert, murmuring and wandering. And you remember that in Exodus, in Numbers, there was 2 census. The first census was for the generation that came from Egypt at the beginning of their journey. The second census was for the second generation that will enter into the promised land. All the first generation died except Caleb and Joshua. The rest died because they disobeyed God. You remember the story of the 12 spies. It is only 2 that remained firm and steadfast and they were able to give the true report. And you'll see Caleb, even during the conquest, is still a firebrand at over 70 years. He's still a firebrand, and is able to continue with the conquest. Now, Deuteronomy is the farewell address of Moses. It's one of the most quoted books in the Old Testament. You remember when Jesus was tempted in the wilderness, he quoted extensively. All the three quotations were from the book of Deuteronomy. It's among the most quoted books in the Old Testament. How is Christ seen in Pentateuch? In Genesis, Christ is evidently seen. Christ is seen in Genesis as the seed of the woman. Christ is also seen with the types. You remember theophanies, physical manifestation of Christ. Among the theophanies that Christ is seen is a person by the name of Melchizedek. He's a theophany. Moses is the type of Christ in Exodus. And priesthood is a type of Christ. And the sacrifices that we have are types of Christ. Christ is our perfect sacrifice without blemish. Then in Numbers, Christ is man, the type of Christ. Then we'll find the bronze serpent in Numbers 22 is a type of Christ. Then as we go to Deuteronomy and Moses, there is a prophecy of a prophet. Deuteronomy 18:15. Christ is that prophet who is prophesied. So far, so good. Mosaic authorship. Documentary hypothesis, as I was telling you, propagated by Dyson, believes that an editor like Ezra wrote, compiled Pentateuch from four different sources. Source document J, which is called the Jehovahist, which was the animate source. Source document E, the Elohist. Source document B, the Deuteronomist. And the last document is the priestly document. He combined it and put it to be one. What are some of the evidence that they purport to support this view? One, the doublets. They are stories that appear to be seemingly contradictory, like which animal brought the good news that the floods had ended. Number two different creation accounts, Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2. They support the view according to their estimation. They support the views that Pentateuch somebody wrote, combined from a different sources. The different names of God, Jehovah, Elohim, and these different names of God, they think these must have been compiled from different sources. Now you know, when the question will come next time, you will be able to answer more effectively and competently. When you are a Bible scholar, you do not see only the story of the Bible, but beyond the Bible. Now we go to the conquest period. You remember that Canaan was a province of Egypt. It was under the Pharaoh, but before the conquest, Egypt had begun a moral decay, and they had abandoned Palestine. They were just exploiting them. And the kingdom of Egypt was weaker. And when it was weaker, it was ready for the conquest. There are people who doubt the conquest, but archaeological evidence from that site really establishes that they were cities that were fortified. The people who lived in Canaan lived a well-established life. They had sewages. They had cities that they had surrounded. You remember the city of Jericho, the city of Ai. They had well-fortified cities. But this Israel, after they came out of Egypt, they were nomads. So when you look at conquest, it was led by Joshua. And I want to say that as you read the Bible, you only may think that the method that they used in conquest was the method of military conquest. But as you read the Bible clearly, you look at there were other methods that they used. One is assimilation. There were people who were like the Gibeonites. They were assimilated. They wanted to be part of the children of Israel. Number three, there was infiltration. There were people that they went to them and surrounded them. And because of their superior nomadic lifestyle, they infiltrated them. Therefore, as you look at the conquest of Canaan, never look at it only from the military conquest. There was assimilation. There was infiltration. And this was the way it was conquered. In the north of Canaan, it was sparsely populated. The coastal south was heavily populated. There were also indoor areas like the Hivites, the Jebusites who came and settled. We had the Hivites, the Perishites, all of them were settled in Canaan. We look at the story of the conquest. Was it a massacre? Did God kill all these people? We'll find that just like in every story of conquest, there is always an hyperbole. Hyperbole is an exaggeration. Not an exaggeration when you overstate something. Because we'll find that some inhabitants, as you read Joshua, there were some inhabitants that were left. Joshua was written by Joshua, with the exception of few additions, editorial additions. But it was written by Joshua around 1380 BC. The theme of land, the theme of the promise, the theme of rest from the wanderings in the wilderness. These themes are very critical in the time of conquest. Moses had a succession plan, but Joshua did not have. After the demise of Joshua, things fell apart. We now go to the reign of the judges. The judges and the Amphictyony. There was a ruling class, the judges. And when you look at the judges, there were 7 vicious cycles. 7 vicious cycles where the children of Israel sinned, and God sent an oppressor. They cried to God, and finally God relented. He sent a judge. There was peace, and they forgot and sinned again. It's just like all of us. Once we have sinned, and God has sent an oppressor, sometimes we are very remorseful. And when there is peace, we transgress again and sin. That is evident in the book of Judges. And I want to say, what were some of the reasons that prompted the rise of Judges? One, the fixed identity, the fixed membership. There were 12 tribes of Israel. The fixed identity necessitated the need for a judge, the need for Amphictyony, the need for a leader. Number 2, why did they need a judge or a leader to put them together as a confederacy? Why do they need a leader? Number 2, not only because of the fixed membership, the 12 tribes, Number two, because of the common rights, like Shiloh. Shiloh was a place that they met. So they needed a leader. Number three, there was annual festivals. Like they used to go once per year for Passover. And the Day of Atonement, they used to, the Day of Atonement, they used to meet. Therefore, these necessitated that they needed a leader and a judge. They also need someone to organize them in war, to defend themselves. That's why they needed a judge. You remember the book of Judges was written probably by somebody. It was written by an apologist of monarchy. He wanted to defend the monarchy. He says, look at the time of Judges, it was chaotic. By the time of monarchy, we are better off despite the challenges. So preferably, it was written by someone by the name of someone. Yeah, he was a prophet. It was written from a prophetic point of view. You will discover that Joshua and Judges, they are called the former prophets in the discussion of Hebrew canon. So, as we look at Judges, we look at some of the great judges. Among them, we know people like Jephthah, who made a promise. Sometimes when you're excited, don't make a promise. He made a promise when he was excited, he was emotional, he said, God, whatever comes first, I'll give you. And do you know who came first? It's the daughter. In fact, some people say she sacrificed, but the daughter only warned about her virginity. The sacrifice was to be dedicated to God. She was never married. From there, we look at people like Samson, the last judge, a very powerful man with challenges. He achieved a lot, had weaknesses. God uses us with our weaknesses, challenges, and infirmities to promote the kingdom. So we have looked at Judges. During this time of Judges, there is a story that is like a lily in a mud pot. The story of Ruth, the story of loyalty, and the story of a Moabite who became dedicated to God. You know, Elimelech and Naomi and Ruth and Orpah. That's a great story. And I know it was read in Jabe's wedding that your people, Ruth 1:16, your people shall be my people. Your God shall be
My God.
But James said, Amen. But the context of Ruth 1:16 is a lady talking to another lady. Not a lady talking to a man. But anyway, it can be relevant. And in the book of Ruth, we discover the concept of the kinsman's redeemer. Boaz is a type of Christ. And maybe our sister Jill can use some of the tactics of Ruth to get Boaz. Or maybe go to these other ladies who can give you their testimony. And you can utilize the testimony very well. But as we learn the Bible, we also apply it in normal life situations. Now you'll find that in Judges, all the judges were a type of Christ. And Judges chapter 21, verses 25, it says, and everybody, there was no king, and everyone did as he pleased. From the time of Judges, it took around 400 years, the time of monarchy. We have gone to the time of patriarchy. Then there was a time of theocracy that begins with Exodus, and it ends with the time of Judges. From there was a time of the monarchy. The monarchy is the time of the kings. Remember, it's the time of the kings. What were some of the reasons why the children of Israel agitated for a king? Why is it that they agitated for a king? Number one, they wanted to be like other nations. They wanted to be like other nations. Who always sometimes wants to be like the other person? You go to someone's house and you discover he has a good stool. And you decide you want to be like others. And you do not know how he acquired the stool. Maybe he stole it. Some of the reasons why they wanted a king is they wanted to be like other nations. Number two, they wanted someone who will lead them to war. Wanted someone who will lead them to war. And they were tired of the unseen king, this monarchy. They were tired. They wanted a physical, visible king. Number three, the sons of Samuel had become evil and gluttonous. They were taking the choicest part of the meat and eating instead of offering. They were corrupt as judges. They were corrupt. And this necessitated for the demand of the king. We go to the United Monarchy period. The United Monarchy period is a time when Saul was the king, David, and Solomon. The entire kingdom was united. Saul was a king. And Saul achieved many things. One, he defeated some of the enemies. He organized Israel as a king. But he disobeyed God. And he was rejected. He could make very foolish decisions that people to go to war without eating. And he wanted to punish his son for taking honey. And yet he gave them victory. Sometimes when you are a king, when you are a leader, don't make foolish decisions. They'll come to boomerang you. So when Saul was rejected, there came a man after God's own heart, the writer of many psalms. And allow me to mention that David is the writer of 73 psalms. And psalms were written in a period of 1,000 years. The first psalms were written by Moses. Around the period around 1400 BC. The last psalms were written by people like Ezra around 400. So psalms cover a period of 1,000 years. One of the psalms that is in YouTube that I shared, that I preached in Nairobi, from Psalm 90, it has 1,000 views. What will familiar with the Maybe I've never preached 1,000, but YouTube is a good thing. I don't get him of parish. Just bring on YouTube. Ubiri, utapata watu. Hata kama utapata sadaka, you will get the message going. Yesterday, Mama, like yesterday in the chapel. The chapel is there. I shared, it's there. We have a God who did it. So we look, 2 Kings, chapter 5. And I want to tell you from Old Testament, Sabi, you know that the book of Kings was written by who? No. Go and listen to that clip. And tomorrow when you meet, tell me who wrote. It's there. Yesterday's sermon. The title, The God That Liveth. Go and listen to it, and tomorrow you will tell me who wrote it.
You add the viewers.
Uh,
They add the viewers in the list.
yeah, they need to listen to it, and tomorrow tell me, give me a small message. Tell me who wrote it. So for you to know Old Testament something, you know it's helpful in preaching. It's helpful in ministry. Therefore, this I think is a very, very critical unit. You need to understand it. Now, let's proceed. David achieved many things. Among it, he established Jerusalem as the headquarters of Israel. He removed the Jebusites around 1004 BC. He removed the Jebusites from Jerusalem and he made it his capital city. No wonder Jerusalem is called the city of David or the city of God. Jerusalem. Number two, David. Great leader. Was a great musician. I'm saying he wrote 72 songs. And I tell you, Psalms are for every time. When you're sad, read the Psalms. When you're in honeymoon, like James, read the Psalms. When you're mourning, read the Psalms. Ukisumbuliwa na mzee, read the Psalms. I'm a mama for the two of us. Na hata ukisumbuliwa na upweke when you are single, read the Psalms. The Psalms are for everybody and everywhere. Whatever your situation, Psalms will answer you. And I want to tell you Psalms. During this kingship, the other book that was written was in the wisdom books. We say that Job was written during the time of Moses was in the Midian desert. Psalms, majority of it was written by David or someone written by Moses and Ezra, sons of Korah, and Asaph, the chief musician of David. Most of them were written. Even Solomon wrote a psalm. And some think that some psalms were written by Hezekiah. But you will discover that psalms are for people everywhere. It's the most universal of all the Old Testament writings. And I want to tell you, psalms are great. When you go to pastor, try the psalms. They are very relevant. Now, David achieved many things. He achieved many things. He established peace, expanded the territory of Israel, captured most of this land, and brought the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. He achieved many things, but he had serious challenges. He married many wives, more 8. He was a very weak father. He did not discipline his children. They engaged in incest and killed one another. He was a very soft father. He could not be tough on the children. And he committed adultery, killed Uriah, committed adultery with Bathsheba, killed Uriah, but he was a man after God's own heart. Achieved a lot of victories. Solomon was the wisest man. That is the zenith on the top of the United Kingdom. What did he do? He built a palace. He built a temple. What did he do? He established his administration. He organized his administration very well. And he had an army. Well-organized army with chariots. And he utilized the minerals that were around. Some of these challenges. He married 700 wives. He was a strong man. If Kenyan men die with only one, about Solomon, 700, he was a very strong man. And concubines and prostitutes, those are some of the weaknesses. And these women led him away from God. Number 2, he overtaxed his people to support his extravagant lifestyle. Number 3, he used forced labor against his covenant brothers. It was not acceptable. And the other thing is that he spent more time building his palace than the temple. So we will discover that all these factors, he practiced nepotism. He did not tax his brothers in the south, the Benjamites and the Judeans, the people of Judah and Benjamin. He did not tax them, but he taxed the rest. Those are some of the factors that promoted, because of his adultery, not because of his idolatry, he was punished. And God says he's going to split his kingdom, but not during his lifetime. What were some of the factors that promote the division of the kingdom? One, Solomon's high taxation. Number two, Rehoboam followed the wisdom of the foolish young men instead of the elders. He said, "You will be tougher." He said, "Your father used a whip, I will use scorpions." He said, "My thumb is bigger than my father's waist." And from there, the kingdom was divided. Kingdom was divided. There was a person to lead the rebellion. He was called Jeroboam and Rehoboam. Therefore, for the next period, we are going to look at the divided monarchy in detail as we continue. We are going to look at the nation of the northern nation that was called Israel. Its headquarters was Samaria. There was no good king. The southern kingdoms, the headquarters was Jerusalem. And they had around 5 good kings. Jehoshaphat, Josiah, we look at him, and the reformation that he brought in. And that's why they stayed longer. 722 BC, you should not forget, this is a very critical date. There was the Assyrian captivity. Then 586 BC, there was the Babylonian captivity. Babylonian captivity. These are very, very critical dates as you study the Old Testament. Never ever forget these dates. They are very, very critical. Something that I forgot to mention in the monarchy, during the time of the United Monarchy, we saw that Solomon wrote 3 books. One, when he was a strong young man, he wrote songs of songs. Where Jebus is, and you, songs of songs. It was about love and romance. It was about his love to the Shulamite bride. And it expresses. Some people interpret it. They interpret it allegorically and liken it to Christ and the church, which is valid. But also it expresses the genuineness of romance within the context of marriage. And I know some of the young men have used quotation from songs of Solomon to express love. It's within that context. And there are 2 different interpretations. He wrote it while he was a young man. Then, when he was a middle-aged man, he wrote Proverbs that expresses the middle-aged wisdom. Ecclesiastes, he wrote it as an old man to express the old man's lamentations. He was lamenting, and he was seriously lamenting. Therefore, this is the situation. From there, during the divided monarchy period, we had many prophets. Among them, Isaiah, the major prophets. We had Isaiah. And Isaiah is called the most evangelical of all the prophets. His book could be known as the prophet, the book, the gospel according to Isaiah. And there are different views of the authorship. There are those who believe in single Isaiah authorship. There are people who believe in Deutero Isaiah. But Deutero, that Isaiah, the original Isaiah wrote from chapter 1 to 39. Deutero Isaiah wrote from 40 to 66. There are those with a different opinion. They say the first Isaiah, the original one, wrote from 1 to 39. And Deutero Isaiah wrote from 40 to 55. And Trito Isaiah wrote from 56 to 66. Isaiah has 66 chapters, just like the Bible. It is a miniature Bible. From 1 to 39, some look at it as the Old Testament. From 40 to 66, some look at it as the Old Testament. It expresses Christ in very clear and vivid words. Christ is the son of a virgin. You look at Jeremiah, the weeping prophet, who prophesies towards the end of the Babylonian, towards the end of Babylonian captivity. And Isaiah never married. Isaiah never had a convert. Jeremiah, sorry. Jeremiah never married. Isaiah married. Jeremiah never married. Jeremiah never had a convert, a single convert. But in Jeremiah, Christ is presented as the balm of Gilead, the sister that never cries, and the shepherd. Just like David presents Christ as the shepherd, the good shepherd. Now, we look at Ezekiel. Ezekiel prophesied during the Babylonian captivity. You remember, 6 or 5, Daniel was taken to captivity. And Daniel saw the captivity from the beginning to the end. Then, 597, Ezekiel was taken to captivity. 586, Jeremiah was left in the land. There were 6, 3 exile period and 3 exile comings. You remember the first coming was led by Zerubbabel, the second one by Ezra, and the last one by Nehemiah. There were 3 comings from the exile. 3 going from the exile. So biblical number 3 is a good number, perfect number. 7 is also a perfect number. So you will discover as you read. Then we'll have lamentation, is the lamentation of prophet Jeremiah. Jeremiah in lamentation, he looks backward and see. He looks backwards and see the destruction of Jerusalem. In Jeremiah, he looks forward and he predicts that after 70 years, they will come back to the land. From it, we go to prophets like Hosea. Hosea is a story of love. Great love. Hosea was commanded to marry Gomer, a prostitute, which he obliged and married her. We look at that interesting story. And the children of Hosea and Gomer depicts the relationship between God and Israel. God is faithful, and the Israelites are unfaithful. Joel, we are not very certain when it was written, but it is an early exilic prophet. Pre-exilic prophet, an early pre-exilic prophet. And the day of the Lord and the coming of the Holy Spirit looms great in the book of Joel. And from there, we go to Obadiah. Obadiah is the shortest Bible as a prophet, prophecy of Edom. We go to Amos, the prophet of social justice. We go to Jonah. Amos was from the south, called to preach in the north. He was not a professional prophet, but he was a shepherd and a keeper of the sycamore tree. Now, as we look at these books, and as we look at them very keenly and very critically, we look at them and deduce how they are. And we look at books like Habakkuk, the people question God. We look at Zephaniah, prophet from the king's line, from the Davidic line. We look at Zechariah and Haggai, who encouraged the children of Israel to rebuild the temple. And later, we look at Nahum, what Jonah was escaping from. Jonah did not want the Ninevites or the Assyrians to survive. He was a reluctant prophet, and he was not happy with his results. He preached for the people to repent, but he was not happy when they repented. He wanted to die. Nahum predicted the destruction of Nineveh. That happened 150 years later. Later, we look at Haggai, Zechariah, who encouraged the people to rebuild the temple. We conclude by looking at Malachi, who encouraged social reforms and condemned the intermarriages. And he talked about tithe, he talks about God's judgment. From there is 400 silent periods. That's when we get the Maccabees, and we look at the reign from the Babylonian. There was the Medo-Persian Empire, we get it in the Bible. Then from the Greek, people like Antiochus Epiphanes. We look at them in the silent period and the rebellion by the Maccabees, and later the New Testament. I think I've had a simple summary of what we are going to cover in the Old Testament survey. It is my prayer that you will understand. We look at the survey and the books because we will not have any other time. May the Lord richly bless you. And may He be with you as we study this critical subject matter. Old